All right. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. We are going to kick off today. We're going to have a good jobs to be done discussion today and talk about how AI may or may not be helping us to speed up the work that it takes to do good jobs to be done type research and apply that theory to your product work. But before we do that, we're going to kick it off with our first cup. And in the studio with me today, got a couple of guests, and then we got a couple on the remote as well. First up, he used to design album covers in his dad's music shop. Now he reverse engineers why buyers switch products, and somehow both still count as art. It's Devin Smith, founder of Podium Studios.
Man, I can't believe you remembered.
I mean, I dig up the deep cuts when I can. Wow. Sometimes it's harder than others. And then sitting next to Devin, he's part trail guide, part taco critic, and has all saint-like patience with confused users. It's Matt Wallens, founder of UX Research Atlanta and 80 Watts. Welcome, Matt. First time with us in the studio. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
And the next guy coming to us from the Raleigh-Durham area is a guy who says a product manager who can't interview customers is a musician without scales. And that's Scott Burleson from the AIM Institute. Welcome, Scott. And last but certainly not least, she's a philosophy grad who transformed how people park. It's Kara Womack, head of transformation at Arrive. Welcome, Kara, too. Glad to have you all here. All right. So for today's first cup discussion, somebody spun up a fake brand. She spent $11 in about an hour and got AI recommending it like it was a real deal. She created this fake deodorant brand. And the whole point was just to see how the AI-based promotion really works. She had this idea that there's this hidden dark AI shelf that products sit on that AI figures out which one to take off at some point. But anyway, and she got her product that didn't even exist recommended in ChatGPT. And so the question is, if there's a made-up product that can talk its way past ChatGPT and Perplexity for just like what amounts to lunch money, every credibility signal that you've been leaning on, reviews, clinical claims, brand reputation, might not carry over to the new discovery layer. How does it really work? And what are the implications of this experiment? And what did you think about it? I'm going to jump over to you first, Devin.
I mean, my first thought, if I'm looking at this as I read her article. If I'm working at Anthropic or Google or OpenAI, I'm thinking, I got to fix this because this is a problem. And I actually think that obviously, in the marketing world, there's going to be like this move to figure out like, how do we get in the black box? Like, how do we, how do we show up first? It's the same thing as SEO, right? Because one of the things she said in the article is that somebody said, well, this is just SEO. And she's saying like, kind of, yeah, except you can see where you rank on Google. You can't see where you rank with the LLM. And I honestly think it's more of a problem for the AI companies to solve than anything else, because the fact that she was able to do this that's a massive decrease in trust. If the general public knew that, it would instantly be a hit to stock prices. There would be boardroom conversations. So I definitely think it's actually an issue they have to fix.
Yeah. There are a lot of implications to it. Matt, well, you wrote something about this recently, didn't you?
I don't know if I wrote about it. I did an experiment myself,
Okay.
a similar experiment a few months ago where I had an idea for a service. It wasn't a product. And I just said, I'm just going to spin up a website. Same idea. On the weekend, I was bored. And I just want to see how I could do with chat and SEO and how I could rank. And within a couple weeks, I was like up there with like established services in my area. So it was a localized service offering. It wasn't a product. But the technology's out there. It is changing. And I'm not an SEO expert. I'm not an AI expert. But I read enough to learn some of the tools to use to increase my exposure. M.text file, which helps AI bots read your website and things like that. But so your interesting take is it's a problem for Anthropic and the search. My first thought, and I'm not saying it's wrong or I disagree. It's interesting. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. But from a product, because it was framed as like a marketing problem, but it's also kind of a product problem in my mind.
Yeah, definitely.
And where my head went from as a researcher is, okay, well, now it's a challenge for the product teams to continue to establish themselves and show what their value is, because that's what an AI will differentiate you from a fake product. Learn what your users actually want. What are their pain points? And then you can market and sell that product, build that product for those specific searches that they might be putting into a chat. So in that case, they were looking for certain ingredients into the deodorant.
Right.
Okay, so a good product person or a good researcher would be able to uncover those nuances
Sure.
and apply that to their SEO and their AI search.
Right, but that's invisible now. So you don't even have that research path because you can't see what people are asking the LLM.
No, but you can ask the people.
Yeah,
And that's what they're going to put into the LM. That's what I'm saying is talk to the people.
Did you just suggest to
I know.
talk to Cust?
It's a crazy thought. Don't get me wrong. But if you can predict what they're going to be searching in ChatGPT, then you can be proactive on it. That's my point.
Yep. Scott, thanks for joining us today. So I threw this at you the other night, and you actually had a take on it, and I couldn't wait to hear about it as well. So tell me what your thoughts were.
I'll be the first to say that this sounds sort of an odd statement, but I am a bit of a student of technology history. Having said that, I feel like I'm completely in the fog of war with AI. It's changing so fast. I'm really measured in what I say, certainly in what it will be able to do. But so I sort of stay confused. Having said that, let me address your question. I mean, with any new technology, there's always going to be these, things that get sorted out over time that people take advantage of things. In fact, you're talking about SEO. I was thinking, even in my company, we really optimized, I guess like everybody did, for SEO for a while. And I got really good at writing articles and all. I didn't even, at first we had software that would audit it. But after a while, I didn't need it because I knew how to do everything. And what happened was we ended up ranking really high in all these terms, but also we had all these bounce rates because I was so good at ranking high. I was attracting people that we weren't relevant for. And so eventually, the SEO algorithms, you guys probably know about it more than me, but I presume that you get penalized for those high bounces and it stops recommending me. So what happened? I took advantage of the algorithm, but that only worked for a short season.
Right.
And I think the most direct answer to your question is that's probably, we're in a bit of a transitional phase and those things will get worked out.
Yeah, I think you're probably right on that front. And notably, she only got it to show up on, I think, ChatGPT and Perplexity, Anthropic, and I guess Gemini. Just totally ignored it. Didn't see it at all.
Right.
And maybe Grok too. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that she said that she was only able to get it to show up in one. And then I want to say that she said that she was kind of like back of the store for one of them.
On a dusty shelf.
Yeah, on the
Really
dusty shelf. But she got in there, though. She still got in.
Which is a really interesting metaphor. Before I want to talk about that in a minute, but let's jump over to Kara first. Kara, welcome. Thanks for jumping on here with us. What did you think? What are the implications of this experiment to you?
I mean, I think the implications there's a lot to kind of unpack there. And like I said, my hot take is still cooking, but I have lots of thoughts about this. I mean, first, do you guys remember those Holiday Inn commercials where like something would happen and, the car would break down and a guy would show up and he'd like, oh, are you a mechanic? No, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn last night.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, I feel a little bit like that's AI. And they're getting back these overconfident, underinformed responses. And so I think some of that is just going to have to kind of settle down, right?
Yep.
And it's going to continue to be a challenge because a lot of websites that would provide some of those credibility metrics, things like, consumer reports and whatever, are blocking AI from indexing them. And so what you end up with is like this kind of garbage in, garbage out, self-fulfilling kind of cycle. So, and to some extent, it's going to be incumbent on the humans to go through and sort of do a little bit of, due diligence around this and treat AI like a tool and not like a magic 8-ball that you can just shake into the perfect answer.
Yep.
But as far as, so I think to some extent, all of you are right. I think it's a little bit like the early days of search engines and SEO where we kind of have to like ride this out and let these folks kind of figure out like what are these relevance algorithms and credibility algorithms and sources going to be. We have to sort of let the AI economy settle and so they can figure out how to monetize these bots instead of blocking them so that they can access better content and we can get better information coming back out of AI. And product and marketing leaders, I think the worst thing they can do would be what we tried to do in the early days, which is just chase all of these, different changes to the algorithms and, spend millions of dollars on SEO rankings only to have them completely blow up, 6 months later every time the algorithm changed like that. We can't go through that again. We just got to keep building good products, doing good research, making sure more now than ever that we're connecting with the people that use our products and understanding why they use them and how they discover them, and try to meet them where they are so that they're not going to ChatGPT and saying, hey, can you find me a new, deodorant that doesn't have what is it?
Baking soda.
Mercury?
Yeah.
Baking soda.
Magnesium,
Yeah.
and stuff. Yeah.
Whatever it was. Like, find me whatever deodorant. Like, we should be able to give them that answer.
Yeah.
Aluminum. Thank you, Kelly.
Yep. Allison said, Kara, I keep a mini magic 8-ball on my desk with problems.
I'm not saying 8 balls don't have their.
No, if you're in the Zoom with us, and I know Kelly has dropped the link to this article in, but even if just from what you've heard so far, if you want to weigh in or ask a question or have a thought on this, would love to hear your hot take too. So just throw your virtual hand up there, and in just a minute we'll go around and do some introductions for the folks who are in the room as well and get to know everybody a little bit. So please, I strongly encourage you, if you are here with us on Zoom, turn on that camera, be a part of the meetup. Don't just sit off there in the dark corner over on the side. Come and join us in the room. But a couple of things went through my mind as I was thinking about this. First of all, I wanted to know more about the methodology, and so the actual scientific methodology was one point of interest from me. And I'm not gonna tear that up because it was just an interesting thought experiment. But the kind of the chess move down the board question me, you touched on it. And yes, that real customer research, that real investigative research, that ethnography, that it is critically important still. However, one of the things that we rely on to just figure out what directions to start looking in is the zeitgeist. And looking at things like Google search helps us understand what's on the rise, what signals are rising, and that's going to turn invisible, or at least much more invisible. So that tool may or may not continue to be as valuable. And I'm wondering if there's somebody out there solving that problem just from a early stage research perspective. If you know somebody who's out there thinking about that problem, I'd love to hear from them and talk about that a little bit, because getting the research from early ideation and just those early signals all the way through the full experience is critical part of what we do.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But a lot of those tools though, they're so broad in their feedback. The people that are basically accounted for in that research is not the same as the people using your product or your current customers,
true.
those types of things. So there are ways to drill down into your specific segmentation to get more feedback directionally for your product, just to throw that out there too.
Yeah. That's a good point too. And then the other thing that came to mind is it's more the future. Are we moving towards Star Trek or Blade Runner? And I don't know which it is yet. I tend to lean towards Star Trek, but every once in a while I have a Blade Runner moment.
It's Mad Max.
Yeah. I sure hope we're not going to Mad Max.
Although
I'll
big
take the
tank to
car.
store gasoline.
Yeah.
That's the new money.
Look at the LLM asks you a question, you're like, that's bait.
But the other kind of future tense thing, and we don't even really know how much the AI search reality is, what that search reality is going to look like even 6 months from now. But one thing that is really interesting is these inference LLMs, these capabilities have insights at a scale and a level that Google doesn't have in search even alone, because they're getting a bigger context and they're getting a continued conversation. And I cannot help but wonder if there's going to come a moment when Claude or Perplexity or Google or somebody is starting to sell insights on a level of identifying emerging customer needs and market needs that haven't yet been sensed anywhere else, and either selling that data or leveraging that data to create products for which there is no traditional market, but there's a tiny little niche asking about a specific product that we can push in front of somebody that solves their tiny little niche problem very quickly.
Yep.
And do we come to a place where that becomes just part of how we live. And is that a Star Trek moment or a Blade Runner moment?
Right. I will say the AI company that's probably closest to being able to at least monetize that search would be Google, because they have AI, they have Gemini built into Google search now. And I use the ever living daylights out of that. You know, like I'll ask one question and I will ask it follow-ups. The way that I use Google search now is very different than it was two years ago, even 1 year ago. And it's way smarter. It's not, you know, it's not anywhere near as dumb, right? But it has the same vulnerabilities as what we're talking about right now. And I have seen that happen before, where it brings up something as though it's a big deal, and I go and I dig into it. I'm like, dude, this is like a couple of people on Reddit like freaking said something. You're presenting this to me like this is a big deal. Or you found a YouTube video and you think that this YouTuber it is the foremost expert on this thing.
Yeah, not gonna lie, I found this little article about this girl that did this one little experiment with a fake deodorant. Big deal out of it.
Oh, right. But like, I think that Google is collecting all that data, and they're going to be able to say, this is what people are searching for all the time. And it's a different level of conversation than you just used to type into a search box. It's a way deeper level of conversation. And I think that's going to be extremely valuable data. I think Google's going to be they're going to be the first ones to be able to take advantage of it, in my opinion.
Interesting.
Like you said, I think the confidence measure is so much different with the chats than it is on Google search. And now, surely the first thing is you're going to say, okay, that's probably the best one or the most important one. But the way that the chatbots are reinforcing their own predictions and their own recommendations is really tricking people's brain
100%.
into a false confidence. I think someone mentioned it before on the panel. Like, that's kind of the differentiator between SEO and what the AI recommendations are doing.
Yeah,
it's true.
And we've taught people over years to kind of be skeptical of marketing, commercials, websites. We haven't gotten there yet with the chats.
This should be there right now.
It should be, but I'm saying that's like the next, I think, wave is we have to teach people.
It's so confident. It still fools people. David, you've had your hand up for a minute. Welcome, David Dean, author of An Inbox Between Us and our current book club feature. Hey, Dave, welcome. You're going to have to come off mute for us.
Am I good?
Yeah, there we go.
Awesome. Yeah, so this is something, I wrote an article about this earlier, but conceptually around the paid. So when you have a user that's interacting with the system like Google search, you know, you were presented a lot of different options, you know, with it. I could go down the line, I could look at the first one, you know, you have the paid advertisement. But when it comes to an LLM and how the information is presented, it's presented in line. So it's written in such a way that it could make sense to a person. And so the one thing I was wondering about is your opinions around the social engineering aspect of that, as well as kind of organizational data collection, because I'm sure like Google and like other companies know that I work for this company, I do these things, these are the things that I care about. So then when a regular business user happens to use some kind of search or some kind of LLM, and it's like, hey, I know this person, I'm going to influence this person, I'm going to pay you to influence this person to these types of answers rather than these types of answers, in line as a part of the response with that. What are your thoughts around that, and like kind of control and govern that, you know, because people may not know what they're actually getting influenced on, especially even in the business world.
Yeah, and it's even an even blacker box.
Right.
Anybody want to jump on that?
Gosh, it's a great question. I don't have an answer ready to go. I think that's something that people should be concerned about. I think, again, it goes into that whole false confidence on what the LMs are providing and returning on those searches. And people don't think about, like Devin was saying, how much information they actually have and how much of that is baked into those responses. A question that I ask Claude, whoever, you might ask them the same question, we're getting different answers. People don't even realize that aspect of it. It's not Google where everyone's getting the same response,
right?
Search results, maybe different on geography and stuff like that. But realistically, I ask them how to change a light bulb. You might ask them the same question. And based on our history of questions and what it knows about, it's giving us different directions, maybe simple, advanced, whatever it might be. And people don't realize that that's part of the equation right now.
Yeah.
Sticking to the movie theme.
What's that?
Sticking to the movie theme.
Yeah.
These aren't the droids you're looking at.
Yeah. Well done, Joel. You know, one thing I can say with a great deal of confidence to your question, David, is no matter what the right solution is, the European Union Parliament is going to force one on us, and it will probably be a really bad one.
Yeah, they're good. They're good for that.
That's kind of as I say that tongue in cheek. If you've been following the news, Anthropic announced, I think it was last week, that they are starting to watermark all of their output.
Yes.
To respond to the EU regulations around making it easy to identify AI generated content. And there's a lot of questions and uncertainty about what that's actually going to mean and how that's going to actually impact things. But there's a strong desire for people to know what's AI generated, and specifically mechanically to understand, to be able to detect what is AI generated so that it can be consumed in the appropriate way. And if I'm really setting aside the advertising implications and the SEO implications, and I'm just saying we want to be able to understand the provenance of the information that we're looking at, so that we can put the right level of critical thinking against it, as we were talking about a moment ago. That's what the watermarking concept is supposed to do. We assume that OpenAI and Gemini and Google and Grok are going to have something similar in the near future because the EU is regulating it. I suspect that we'll end up with some sort of similar level of either industry self-regulation or transparency about why recommendations are made, or being able to dig in and to understand the answers to those questions to combat the inevitable social engineering that you're referring to, David. Devin.
I'm generally not a fan of EU overregulation, but if this solves LinkedIn AI slop, I'm in.
Fair enough.
Sorry,
Not just the LinkedIn.
gotta hand it to them. You know,
Yep.
they're like one for maybe 15,000 with me. They forced Apple to use USB-C. If they can solve LinkedIn AI slop, they'll be 2 for 15,000.
Yep.
I mean, hey,
There you go. I want to thank our panel for being here to kick things off today. Thank you so much to Devin and Matt and Scott and Kara for helping us start the conversation. I've got my cup of coffee. And for those of you who are only marginally familiar with Jobs to be Done, I think everybody's heard of it at least. Some have a greater understanding. But the question is, what job did I hire my coffee to do this morning? I didn't hire it for caffeine, right? I hired it because, well, I wanted to pick me up. I've got this routine that just kind of gets my day off to a start, and this flavor and this warmth and the caffeine are part of that routine start to my day. It's to get me going in the morning. And I feel like a functional adult, even at 12:15 in the afternoon. But that's the overall Jobs to be Done thinking, but it's a lot sharper than most product discovery techniques. And so Devin is our resident here. Scott is joining us from Raleigh. And we're going to build this around some real stories to talk about how Jobs to be Done has influenced the products and the promotion of both of the things that you're using right now. But we're also going to talk about the implications now and and we're going to talk about switch interviews a little bit, how you use those to identify the real jobs that people are using your product for. So the first thing I want to talk about, let's just talk about some real world stories. And I know you've got one, we might have another. One of the most famous and popular that I read about continuously is the McDonald's milkshake story. And McDonald's I think it was back in the 90s.
yeah, I think Bob said it was like back in the 90s.
Yeah, they were trying to figure out how to sell more milkshakes, basically. And they started doing this jobs research. And what they discovered is that they were selling a bunch of milkshakes early in the morning. And they couldn't figure out why. And so they started digging in and doing the interviews and doing the actual customer research. And they found out that basically these people were buying these milkshakes because they're thick, they're kind of filling, they take a long time to get through. People were stuck in their cars, bored off their gourd on their commute. And they wanted that milkshake for just both that flavor, and it's kind of like a breakfast, but not really. But it took their whole commute. It stayed frozen. They were having it to accompany them on their commute. And so that changed what some of the key ways that McDonald's sold and promoted their milkshakes to, especially in the morning. Not everybody was even selling them in the morning. It was like, no, we got to have these available in the morning, not just in the afternoon. It's not just a dessert. Milkshakes are for breakfast too. And then even more impressively, I think, is Intercom. And you guys all know Intercom. It's that little chat box that lives in the bottom right-hand corner of a lot of websites. Well, they started out, they had this one product, and it was having hit or miss adoption, and it wasn't really it was confusing to a lot of people. And so they brought in some jobs to be done. They did some jobs research, and they found out that people were actually doing 4 completely different things with Intercom. Fundamentally different things. And they were doing, what were they doing? Where did I put my notes here? They were using it to discover some things. So they were using it for support. People were, hang on, I've got it written down here. You may remember it.
Like tracking location, was that?
Maybe it was
This one, I actually don't know
I
this
can't remember the
story as
details.
well.
I've heard it as
okay.
well.
I
I
had,
apologize. This is
No,
one I should know because I've
that's-
heard it before, but it's not one of the
and I
ones
had
know
it
as
written
well.
down, and I apparently messed it up somehow. So, but it had 4 different jobs and 4 distinctly different things that people were using it from. One of them was support. One of them was discovery. But what they fundamentally did is they split this one product into 4 products, separate products that had a specific job. And once they did, they, like, within 18 months had a 500%, just absolutely blew the top off of it. And I think you had one that you were talking about with one of your clients as well.
Yeah. So that this was like online. This was an online education company. A woman who used to teach in college decided that she kind of saw the problems of some of the students coming into her class firsthand, and those who wanted to go on. It was in the healthcare space who wanted to go on to further education. And so she decided to make a product. But they knew that she kind of intuitively knew what some of the problems were, but they knew that they didn't know all of the context, and they knew that they didn't know all of the ways that this online product, this education product, was being used, and they wanted to make it better. And so they were like, "Hey, Devin, we heard you nerd out about this whole jobs to be done thing for years. Would you be willing to interview some of our customers?" And she had built this sort of like mob of folks who followed her on TikTok who just absolutely raved about the product, and they were trying to grow it. And so I wound up working with them and started interviewing some of their customers. And it was interesting because switch interviews wind up being kind of like part therapy session because these people are connecting dots that they didn't connect when they were in the process, and they're reliving something. And so I'm talking to these students and former students, and I've got this woman and her husband who works in the business with her on the call, and they're listening in, and I'm just going through like, "Hey, all right, when did you first realize you had a problem?" We're going through the normal switch interview stuff, and this context comes in where they're talking about, "Oh, this is actually like my 3rd or 4th time taking the test, and I bought this book, and I watched this YouTube channel, and this." And so we're in the process of doing this, and they're finding out who their real competitors are. They're finding out the actual competitive set. They're competing against these textbooks. They're competing against YouTubers. They're competing against sometimes the schools themselves. And they are finding out where the struggle points are and all this stuff. So we get through this process, and we don't even get 3. I mean, I think we got like 2 or 3 interviews in, and they said, "We already know exactly how we're going to change the product. We already know exactly what we're going to do." I think we did somewhere between 5 and 10. Normally I like to do a round of 10. We did somewhere between 5 and 10, and they just immediately sprang into action. Fast forward maybe like 6 months after that. And they moved fast. They implemented the changes quickly. They scaled the business to 7 figures.